Hey guys, this is John, and welcome to another episode of Climbing the Tactics Training Ladder. So, you know the drill by now. Some time ago, I reset my tactics training rating, starting at 1200. That's the rating everyone starts at on chess.com. And I've been climbing my way back up the ladder, trying to see how far I can go. And I believe this is video number 15. So, I want to reiterate that getting better at tactics and getting better at chess is a long haul. It's not going to happen overnight, so you got to stick with it. So video number 15, I'm currently at 2329. We're always solving for accuracy. We don't care how fast we solve these problems. And with that introduction, let's get into it. Okay, pretty sure I've had this problem before. This does happen on the chess.com tactics trainer sometimes. So there are numerous weak points in black's position. The g7 pawn is hanging. I could take that immediately. But there's also this idea of playing queen d5, forking the pawn on f7 and the rook on a8. And in addition to that, there's bishop takes f7. So checking, trying to draw the king out to f7, and then playing queen d5 check. So this is a move order question, as many of these problems are. Which one is best? Well, queen takes g7 will be met by queen f6. And we're not going to win the rook in the corner. I guess we could play bishop takes f7 then, but it looks a little murky, especially in the case that black grabs on f7, and then after we take on h8, plays queen takes f2 check. So I'm leaning more towards queen d5 or bishop takes f7. Queen d5, just at a glance, looks like the much more forcing and better line, threatening mate. And yeah, I think black's going to have to part with the whole rook in order to escape that. Queen d5, I should look at queen f6 though. Queen f6, queen takes a8, queen takes f2 check, king over to d1. And is it worth the discomfort that our king is experiencing in order to win a rook? Kind of appears that way. That's a lot of material. So I think I'm going to go with queen d5. Bishop takes f7. Black can always sidestep. King f8. That limits our gains. So yeah, let's play this one. And there you go. Queen there. Queen takes a8. Just double checking that queen takes f2 doesn't hurt us too bad. But I think this should be all right. Yeah, and problem solved for a single point. But I think it was good that we did our due diligence and worked through those other lines too. Queen takes g7 and bishop takes f7, just to make sure, because there were 3 tempting continuations there. Got to make sure you're getting the right one. So let's just explore that problem briefly. Always good to take an accounting of your undefended material. So the pawn on g7, by virtue of black's last move, which was bishop from f8 to c5, it is hanging, so there's a temptation just to grab it. But then black will play queen f6, and the queen is helping to defend the rook on h8. I did see that I could play this move, but I guess at the very least, black can just move their king. Although then that will run into bishop g5, doesn't it? Like if king e7, let's say, bishop g5 is winning the queen. So queen takes f7, queen takes here. This is similar to the actual solution, except white hasn't won quite as much material because we had to give up our bishop in the process. It's a completely different rook that we're winning, the solution, but here, white is not up as much as we would be if we took that rook on a8 as in the problem. So the other line was bishop takes f7 I was considering, so trying to draw the king out so we can get this fork, queen d5 check. But again, it's not quite as much material, and I think black can play king f8 here and maybe stay down only a pawn. So queen d5 on the other hand, hit the pawn, hit the rook in the corner. That's going to win an entire rook. Black must do something about the threat of queen takes f7 mate, so queen f6 makes the most sense since it's a counterattack on f2. But after this, we're not getting checkmated. Yeah, the position of our king is a slight concern, but one thing I did notice is that the bishop on c8 is pinned, so that won't be joining the attack anytime soon. Let's say if black were to play d6 or d5 trying to get the bishop out to g4, we're just going to pick that piece up with check. So I have faith that white will be winning from here. And as you can see from the computer, white is quite a bit better. Okay, next problem. So white has a big attack here. Black's king is stuck in the center. White has sacrificed a piece to reach this position. Just scanning the material, white has 1 pawn for the piece. I do a lot of canceling when I'm counting material, by the way. I've talked about this before. Canceling clusters of pieces out, like queen for queen, rook for rook, etc. So we can take the pawn on g6 with check. Black will be forced to block. What's our follow-up then, though? We can also try to attack this bishop. So bishop d6 or bishop g5, both of those moves are tempting. Because this bishop is already attacked twice by our queen and the rook behind it, so adding another attacker is just a logical continuation, I think. So queen takes g6 check, rook f7. If then, let's say bishop g5, maybe black can sidestep king f8. And black seems to be defending there. What about bishop d6 or bishop g5 immediately? Let's say bishop d6, then rook f7, bishop takes e7. If queen takes e7, then queen takes g6, and we are going to win the queen for a rook. So I like that line. So bishop d6, rook f7, bishop takes e7, rook takes e7. And then if queen g8 check, there is knight f8 to block. It's a bit of a bummer. I wish black didn't have that knight f8 resource. We can also play queen takes g6 check after the rook takes e7 move. Black would have to play king f8 there. Don't see a win in that position. This knight is pesky. It's going to come and defend in a lot of lines. Okay, here's a completely different idea. What if we play bishop c7? Attacking the queen. So instead of attacking the pin piece, what if we attack the prime defender, which is the black queen on d8? So bishop c7, if queen takes e7, queen takes e7 is checkmate. So the only option black really has is counterattacking our queen. So bishop c7, rook f6, let's say. Then bishop takes d8, rook takes e6, rook takes e6, king takes d8, might run into rook d to e1. There is bishop g5 check. Okay, so we're coming up a little empty there. Maybe just bishop c7, rook f6, queen g8 check, rook f8, queen takes g7. That may be the savviest way to get things done. Yeah, I like that. We're keeping the attack on the bishop. If rook f7, queen g8 check, rook back to f8, queen takes g6 is finally going to win the queen. Okay, yeah, I'm going to go for this line. And okay, we get the easier of the lines. Black just taking the bishop and getting checkmated. Again, only got 1 point on that, but I think to really solve this problem properly, you've got to think about rook f6 in this position. Because if I were black, that's the defense I would play. Yeah, and you see up here, moving the rook f7, which does just lose the queen, but also rook f6 is an important resource we have to consider trying to counterattack. And then I was looking at queen g8 check. Black has to block somehow. If they block with the knight, we can just take the queen. So here, basically, I'm trying to avoid giving up my queen for the black rook. So I'd like to take here, and that maintains the attack on the bishop. So again, this move will be met by checkmate. And the line I mentioned is that if rook f7, there's queen g8 check, king here, and then take that pawn with check, after which we are finally ready to take the black queen on d8. We'll just be up a decisive amount of material. So even though the computer is registering rook f7 is the best try here. I mean, rook f6, rook f7 are really close. Rook f6 is really the only move you'd have to concern yourself with in practice, aside from queen takes c7, of course, which we know is met by checkmate. Counterattacking that queen. Let's press on. 1 point at a time, right? Rome was not built in a day. So here, white's king is exposed, no doubt about it. I had a game very similar to this in my bullet practice recently, my last video, the road to 2800. So I had a queen and a bishop on c5, I believe it was, pinning my opponent's pawn on f2. So in such positions, you can play queen g3 check because they can't take you with their pawn. Queen g3 check, white would have to play king h1. But the other line I'm looking at is trying to bring the knight in, so knight g4, adding an attacker to f2 and threatening bishop takes f2 checkmate. However, I'm not as thrilled about that move because it seems like white can also introduce some pieces, like knight over to e4. Bishop takes f2 check is another move I'd have to look at. Forcing move. Let's investigate that. Bishop takes f2 check, king takes f2, knight g4 check. If king g1, then queen g3 is going to lead to checkmate after king f1 or king h1. So bishop takes f2, king takes f2, knight g4 check, king e2 is forced. But then, well, actually that's getting mated as well. Queen g2. Yeah, so I think that's the solution. Just double checking to make sure I'm not missing anything, but this looks to be a straightforward line featuring a series of checks. And now we get knight f2 checkmate. Nice sequence right there. So my instincts said queen g3 to begin with, using the pin on the pawn, but that was sputtering out after king h1. I just didn't see a good follow-up. The alternative, however, taking on f2 immediately, a forcing move, so we got to examine it. It's a check and a capture, so it should be at like the very top of your list. That works out really well. And the reason why queen g3 was falling short is that after king h1, I just didn't see a good way to continue. We could check again, but white could repeat. If we take the pawn on f2, which is sometimes a motif, I don't see a checkmate necessarily. Yeah, the engine says knight e4 here is a decent defense for white. Again, this is a move I'm concerned about, introducing some pieces to the fray and attacking the queen. If queen h3, white can always block with the knight. And white does not have any pawn cover, so that's a huge cause for concern, but there are a lot of pieces around white's king to save him. But bishop takes f2 just does the trick nicely. White must take. We get this check in. White has three options with the king: g1, f1, or e2. e2 runs into checkmate here. So king g1, queen g3, and if king f1, we're mating with the queen on f2. And as you saw with king h1, knight f2 is checkmate. Knight and queen, always a potent attacking unit. That's referenced a lot in chess literature. They talk about how the queen and the knight are so effective together. And that's because they don't reproduce any squares. Unlike, this is an analogy I've often drawn, but a queen and a bishop will always reproduce some squares because they move in the same way. But a queen and a knight move differently, so therefore, when combined, they can create a ton of threats. Okay, what is going on here? This is a messy position. Black has played rook d1, offering the rook. Actually, black took on d1 on the last move. Okay. So taking back seems to be the only move. Is there anything else? And if we do take back, how is black going to play? Probably black will take on a2, I imagine. I'm not a big fan of spending time on moves that you're almost certain you're going to play. So I'm tempted just to play rook takes d1 right now, but this position is so unusual. The fact that the module is giving us this position, it makes me paranoid. I'm looking for resources other than rook takes d1, like stuff like c6 maybe. Although I can't see that really being a good idea. I think rook takes d1 is going to be forced. So rook takes d1, let's say that b takes a2 is the reply. It'd be nice to play rook d8 checkmate, but black has bishop back to e8. Maybe then we have knight d6, threatening rook takes e8. It's awfully close to checkmate. Black would maybe have to move the bishop then, or king e7. It's very close to checkmate. So rook takes d1, b takes a2, rook d8 check, bishop e8. There's also c6, pawn c6. But I'm not as enthusiastic about that because I think they might be able to queen. So rook takes d1, b takes a2, rook d8 check, bishop e8, knight d6. Let's say king e7. Rook takes e8 check, king d7. And how do I stop that pawn from queening? Not a simple task. Do we have to make it that complicated? And after rook takes d1, b takes a2, white is temporarily up a rook. But the thing is, it's looking like we're going to have to give that material back. I mean, maybe I'm not strictly forced to play rook takes d1. As it stands now, it's equal materially. Black is up one pawn, actually. So we're always conditioned to look at recaptures, but maybe there is something other than rook takes d1. Could take on b3. A takes b3. But then black is taking on c1 in between move. I don't believe that would be the solution. So I'm going to look at rook takes d1, b takes a2 again. Rook d8 check, bishop e8. What about c6? c6 could be an option there. c6, and then if b1 queen, we have bishop c5 check, king g8, rook takes e8 check. There's pieces just swarming the black king. King h7, knight g5 check. King h6, knight takes f7 check, king h7. Not sure I have anything more than a draw there. c6 might be too fancy. c6, queen, bishop c5 check, king g8. It's awfully close to a mating net. Ooh, maybe knight e7 there. Knight e7 instead of taking on e8. Knight e7, king h7, knight g5 check, king h6, knight takes f7, king h7, knight g5 check, king h6, knight g8 checkmate. I apologize if you didn't follow that line. If you did, good job. So to recap, rook takes d1, b takes a2, rook d8 check, c6, making way for the bishop to come to c5. And then I'm assuming black's going to queen. That's just my baseline variation. So queen, bishop c5 check, king g8 forced. And now instead of taking the bishop, playing knight e7 check. And black can go to f8, h8, or h7 there, but I think king h7 is the key variation, escaping the 8th rank issues. Knight g5 check, king h6, knight takes f7, king h7, knight g5, king h6, knight g8 checkmate. Unusual mate with the two knights. So the only thing I want to check is if after rook takes d1, b takes a2, rook d8 check, bishop e8, c6, black has some other move, such as taking the pawn or playing maybe b6 even. Let's say knight takes c6 first. Knight takes c6, there's bishop e7 check, king g8, rook takes e8. That's going to be good again for white. I am quite certain. I could always bring my rook back to e1 in that case too. Yeah, I would bet that that's good for white. So if c6, b6, what happens? Then I can play knight d6, and if king e7 in that variation, rook d... No, not rook d7. Maybe king e7 is still a problem. That would be a bummer if black could just respond to c6 with b6. That would kill my entire line. So rook takes d1, b takes a2, rook d8 check, bishop e8, c6, b6. I'd like to make that work, but will it? Knight d6, king e7. Might be coming up empty there. That's just a gut-wrenching feeling when you spend a long time calculating a line and there's just a flaw in it. You're on the verge of playing it, you think it works out, and there's an obstacle. I'm going to look at that one more time because I think this is a decent idea, and I think the solution might have something to do with the lines I'm calculating. So rook takes d1, b takes a2, rook d8 check, bishop e8, c6, b6. White has a dangerous c-pawn in that case. But black's pawn is so fast, it's on the verge of queening. So knight d6 is the most consistent move there, threatening mate, but then king e7. And if pawn c7, there's bishop d7. Ah, but then we play rook takes d7 check. I was missing that resource. c7, bishop d7, rook takes d7 check, king takes d7, c8, queen. Nifty. All right, let's give this a shot. So take here. Check. Now this move. Make way for our bishop to come to c5. Okay, and black plays this line. So now this is the plan. And I was going to play rook takes e8 here, as opposed to knight e7, which just allows the capture. So rook takes e8, king h7, knight g5 check, king h6. In that case, we know we have at least a draw. That's helpful. Knight takes f7, king h7, knight back to g5, king h6. Oh, it's so close to a checkmate. It's so, so close. We're not quite there, though. Maybe rook e3? Could rook e3 do it? With the threat of rook h3 mate. Aha, I think that's going to do it. And if black moves the bishop, we'll have bishop f8. Rook takes e8, king h7, knight g5 check, king h6. I mean, do I even have to take the f7 pawn? I guess I probably should. Okay, well, we're going to do this. Yeah, problem solved. That's what I was worried about. I was going to spend a little more time calculating that, but this happens sometimes where it doesn't make you go through the entire solution. But let's go explore that one. So the problem starts with rook takes d1. And I mentioned straight away that my temptation was just to take the rook immediately, but since this is a tactic, and also the fact that black is 1 point of material, so it's not like black has this crushing material advantage, we could maybe think about playing some other move. So I was looking at a takes b3 or c6, but nothing seems to work. So eventually I decided that rook takes d1 should be played. And black has to pin their hopes on the b pawn, taking on a2, maybe pushing b2, but I didn't really look at b2 too much because it's easier to stop the pawn in that case. Like if b2, rook d8 check, bishop e8, we could always play knight d2 and just put the brakes on this pawn. So b takes a2 has to be the key line, supported by this bishop on g7. And it's hard to stop that pawn. Black is queening in many of these lines. So continuing with the forcing moves, check here. Yeah, and now c6, including the dark square bishop in the attack, getting another piece involved. It just didn't seem to me that white was going to win based on the rook and the knight alone. Knight d6 is a move that I looked at for a little while, but king e7, giving up the bishop with check, but after king d7, again, this pawn is promoting. So working out the details after c6 took some time. But the main line is, if black promotes, we're going to play bishop c5 check, king here. And now I think knight e7 is the quickest way to win, as opposed to rook takes e8. Yeah, knight e7 is made in 20. Not like I saw that entire 20-move sequence, but the main line I saw was, if black plays king h7, then knight g5 check, and it's going to be death by stampede. Ooh, actually, did I make a mistake here and think that knight takes f7 was possible? I think I did. I think I thought knight takes f7, king h7, knight g5, king h6, knight g8 was going to work. But of course, on knight takes f7, black can actually play this move. Fortunately for me, knight g8 is checkmate. So hopefully I would have found that had I got to this point. But that was an error on my part. Yeah, and I don't think black playing king f8 or king h8 is going to change anything here. Both of those moves are losing for black. So that's one line. But before we can play this, I know the idea is really flashy. It looks cool. It's a tactic. We really want to play it. I think you got to look at knight takes c6 or b6. If you just blindly go into that without having looked at those moves, then you're not doing your due diligence, as I often say. So if knight takes c6, then check. I think this was the solution, right? This is the line we looked at. Here, take on e8. And now if king h7, I should have seen that this was probably leading to mate after this idea of playing the rook back to e3, either immediately or I probably would have in a game like taking the pawn, or at least definitely thought about taking the pawn, because we can just repeat with no consequence. And now rook e3, trying to swing the rook over to h3 and checkmate the king. So black does not have time to queen. They get mated if they do that. And one detail that has to be foreseen is that if black plays the bishop away somewhere, like let's say black plays, I don't know, bishop b2, making way for the king to retreat to g7 in the case of rook h3. Then white has bishop f8, dragging the bishop back to g7 and then mating. So, nice point right there. So that refutes knight takes c6. And the other line is b6, trying to control this square. And against this one, it took me a while, but eventually I saw that knight d6 is a good move, threatening rook takes e8 checkmate, king e7, and now c7 I think is the best move. Yep, there we go. c7 is plus 10. And the detail that took a little while to embrace was that after bishop d7, guarding the c8 square, I can just play rook takes d7 check. King takes here, and then queen with check. I didn't go any further than this because it looks like white should win. I mean, I know black is still threatening mate, but with black's king being so exposed, white will win this position. So many lines to be calculated in this one. After rook takes d1. Like, you can plan out the first couple moves pretty reliably, but seeing the consequences of c6 is a difficult undertaking. Next problem. Okay, so white has the makings of an attack. Black's king is exposed. There's no pawn on the g file. White has sacrificed material to reach this position. White's down an exchange and possibly a pawn? Nope, just an exchange. So a bishop for a rook. Immediate candidate moves. Queen g4 check. Bishop takes h7 check. Queen h5. Those are the moves I would start with. Queen g4 check looks to pick up the knight. However, black can retreat the knight to g6, saving it. Maybe then I would think about a move like h4, but it appears kind of slow. Let's table that idea for now. Bishop takes h7, king takes h7, queen h5 is attractive, but somehow I'd like to retain this bishop. Oh, another candidate move I should definitely look at is bishop takes a8, just regaining the material. I mean, no doubt you'd have to consider that one. But I'm looking at the attacking moves first. Bishop takes h7, king takes h7, queen h5 check. King moves over somewhere. Queen takes h4. White wins a pawn in that transaction, but I think we're looking for something better than that. Queen h5 threatens h7, threatens the knight, but I see multiple problems, like, again, knight back to g6, maybe pawn f5. I'm not seeing where that's leading. Okay, so that fourth candidate move that I added to the list, bishop takes a8, rook takes a8. Notice that black has two undefended pieces in that position. Rook on a8, knight on h4. That's the launching point for figuring out how to take advantage of that. So the move queen e4 popped into my head, hitting both of those pieces. And I don't think black can defend both of them. So let's go ahead and play this line. Yeah, undefended pieces, folks. They crop up even in these higher problems. And they will crop up in your games no matter what your level is, even if you're a super grandmaster watching this video. Magnus, I know you watch my videos in your downtime, in your preparation for Karyakin next month. Nice little problem right there. I bet most people, when solving this problem, are going to look at those other forcing moves that I listed. Bishop takes h7, queen g4, queen h5. You're solving a tactic. You're looking at stuff directed towards the enemy king. And bishop takes a8, while winning some material, is not as flashy as those moves. But the reason why this whole thing works is because of those two undefended pieces. Not much more to be said. And that triggers you to look for a double attack on those undefended pieces. Queen e4 fits the bill. All right, next one. Rook takes d6. So the black queen is the only thing defending the rook on d6. So the first move I'm looking at is g3. Black has sacrificed an exchange here, but the position seems messy. White has a potential back rank weakness. It's nice that this rook controls c1. So what's going on in the case of g3? I know that's not a forcing move, but I quickly looked at the forcing moves and just discarded them. Like rook c8, runs into bishop takes c8, queen e8, is met by knight takes e8. Maybe bishop takes f5 is a move we'll have to consider. We'll see. But g3, where's that queen going to go to support the rook? If g3, bishop takes d3, then at the very least, I think we can play g takes f4, bishop takes e2, rook takes d6, white's up 2 exchanges then. Should be an easy win. So g3, queen can't go to e5, that's for sure. We're also solving our back rank issue, by the way, with g3. Sacrificing the rook doesn't appear to do much. G takes f4, rook c1, king here. Black's coming up empty in that line. I'm playing this one pretty fast, but I'm going to take the risk that it's correct. Yeah, now just take this guy. No tricks or anything. Check, easily met by king g2. Okay, so 2 points on that one. You do get worried when the solution seems too easy, but yeah, g3 just taking advantage of black's coordination does the trick. And I want to emphasize that we're always looking at the forcing moves. Like, we never forget about those. It's just that I discarded rook c8 and queen e8 pretty quick. Bishop takes f5 seemed like kind of a neutral exchange at best to me. So I started looking at moves other than that right off the bat. Yeah, not much more to be said about this one. Just driving the queen away from defending the rook. And also taking that back rank mate out of the picture. So the king will always have an escape square to g2. Whoa, what is this problem? So white's up 3 minor pieces, but facing an a pawn that's about to queen. I like these study problems. These are cool. Like, a position like this, very unlikely to occur in a game, but it's good for practicing your calculation. My first thought is this has something to do with a mating net. Often in these types of studies, you allow the opponent to queen, but then you checkmate them after that via some forced series of moves. There's no checks right away. So whatever we play, black can queen on the next move. There's no checks and no way to stop the pawn. So let's try to weave a mating net. Or alternatively, maybe put black in a zugzwang where black has to give up the queen. They have no other good move aside from giving up the queen. And how do we do that? So let's start with a move like knight f to e3. Just trying to bring it closer to the black king. Knight f to e3, a1 queen. And then how am I going to ensnare that queen? Knight c3 maybe. Take away its flight squares. They can check on b2, however, and then the queen is going to get free along the second rank at the very least. So knight f3, not looking so great. Or knight f e3. How about knight f2? Knight f2, a1 queen, knight d3 check. King b1 is forced. Knight d2 check. King a2, bishop b3 checkmate. So that looks like it wins. Don't think I'm missing anything in that line. The 3 minor pieces control a lot of territory. So knight f2, what if black doesn't queen? Something like, let's say king b2. I still check black around, though. Knight d3 check. Maybe black can bank on some sort of stalemate, but I doubt it. If ever we can give up the minor piece for the a pawn, one minor piece, then white will have bishop versus knight, bishop and knight versus king, and that's a theoretical win. So I think this is enough information for us to go for knight f2. Just double checking the line. Knight f2, a1 queen, knight d3 check, king b1, knight d2 check, king a2, bishop b3 checkmate. Yeah, that works. And we're going to get that line. No faster checkmate, doesn't look like it. We're just chasing the black king down. Okay, So my instincts proved correct on that one, in that we're allowing black to queen, but then we're winning after that. I mean, you could deduce this even without instincts, because, as I said, there's no move white can play here that will stop black from queening. So we're just trying to make the best of the situation when black does queen. And with that many pieces in close proximity to the black king, we're looking at mating nets. And that happens to be the case. But as far as what I was saying about, if black played some other move, like let's say black plays like king b1 here. So king b1 just sidestepping. Knight d2 check. I don't know, king here. Even though knight d3 is probably winning, white could also play like this if they really wanted to. Allow black to queen, then take, and as I mentioned, bishop, king, and knight versus king is a win. Good one to know, by the way. I might do a video on this at some point. Next problem. h3. Okay. So black is castled and white is not. So it makes me think that black has an initiative here. Black is down one pawn. So queen b4 check, bishop b4, knight takes f2, bishop f5. All of those are candidate moves. Queen b4 would get the queens off the board. Maybe not what you want to do when you have the initiative. But let's just look at that. Queen takes b4, bishop takes b4 check. King e2, say. And that knight is under attack, might have to move. Yeah, I'm not liking that line. Bishop b4 check, bishop d2, blocking. Bishop takes d2, knight takes d2, knight takes f2. That could be dangerous for white. I could definitely see that being a problem. So yeah, maybe a key thing is trying to force white to move the knight from f3 so we can get at f2. Bishop b4 check, bishop d2, bishop takes. King takes is going to run into queen takes b2, perhaps among other moves. Knight takes f2 is probably good there too. But queen takes b2 forks the king and the rook. So on bishop b4, I think the key move is king e2, as awkward as that looks for white. And let's see if we can punish that. Queen b5 check or queen a6 suggest themselves, but king d1, queen is under attack from the bishop. Knight takes f2 check, king c2. So I think on bishop b4 check, king e2, I kind of like bishop f5, trying to bring more pieces into the action. Bishop f5, if white checks on d5 or c4, we can block with the bishop. Bishop e6 without losing any time. Just looks like there's too many pieces around white's king. Black is going to be flooding the white monarch with attackers. I don't think white's going to be able to survive that. So bishop e4 is looking very promising. And I kind of like bishop f5 too, but one thing about bishop f5 is white might play bishop c4 check, which always enables white to play king f1 later on. So bishop e4 is my best candidate right now. Knight takes f2 I don't think is panning out. Yeah, I'm going to go with this move. Check. Yeah, and white plays that one, which we were not as concerned about. So now I think we can go ahead and come down here and get that fork on the queen and the rook for 1 point. Let's explore this for a moment. So the line I was looking at in more detail than bishop d2 was this one. But as you can see, there's several good ways for black to proceed against that. Checking was kind of tempting, but then after king d1, always the threat of bishop takes b5 is going to slow black down. Yeah, this is also winning, I guess. So bishop f5, on the other hand, after king e2, enables black to get another piece in the attack with tempo and connect the rooks. And it's important that after a check, we can play bishop e6 so we're not losing anything, and I think white's just going to get crushed here. If queen back here, we can probably check on b5 or a6 after that, and with a rook coming to d8, yeah, no way white survives. I wouldn't calculate any further than this in this minus 40 position, now mate in 12 position. All right, I'm going to do one more problem. Tough going, right? Once we get up to these higher rating levels, Maybe being so thorough with my explanations is finally coming back to bite me. Okay, here, queen c8 is the move I'm looking at immediately. Queen c8, king a5, bishop e1, king a4, queen a6, king b3, queen b5, king c2, black escapes. So let's try to adjust this move order maybe. Queen c8, king a5, maybe queen d7 or queen e8 then. But now let's keep with our forcing moves. Queen c8, king a5, bishop e1, king a4. But always that black king is escaping to c2, looks to me. So that's why I'm looking at either bishop e1 immediately or queen c8 and then queen d7 or queen e8, trying to set up a mate on b5. But I don't think that line's going to work. I think if I'm going to play bishop e1, I should do bishop e1 right now, while the queen is still defending the c4 pawn. It's important that black has no checks. No good checks, that is. So if bishop e1, we're threatening queen c8 mate. How can black deal with that? Well, king b7 is going to run into queen d7 check, and then if king b8, the bishop is going to come out to g3. That's also going to deliver mate. King a8, queen c8. So bishop e1 is my prime move right now because of the mate in one threat, and I don't see a good defense for black. Bishop c3, we just take it. Yeah, black's getting mated otherwise. Okay, so black gives up the queen in this line. Check, I guess I could look at, but queen takes c4 is so obviously winning. I don't even really want to waste time looking at check, trying to find a mate after that. This black will play king b5. So let's just take the queen. All right, we got one problem. That's a nice one where you can go down the rabbit hole quite quickly of looking at queen c8, bishop e1, another queen check, trying to mate the opponent. But once you examine this fairly straightforward line, and then here check again, king b3, check one more time, king c2, you see that the black king is always slipping out. So that can give you some information, though, that you'd like to stop the king from escaping. You have a good idea in mind with queen c8, but maybe we can just put the brakes on the black king escaping up the board. So that's why I was looking at bishop e1. I was also looking at check, king a5, and then trying to direct the queen towards the b5 square. So like queen e8, let's say, threatening queen b5. But I think the fact that white always runs into this queen takes c4 move is the problem. So what if we play bishop e1 while the queen is still defending c4? Then queen c8 is just on deck here, threatening, that would be checkmate. So if black went this way to try to cover the c8 square, it's important that on this line, white can pop the bishop out to g3 to assist in setting up a mate, like so. So nice quiet move at the beginning, queen e1. Okay, so difficult rating-wise today. Didn't gain many points, but we solved some interesting problems, and most importantly, I think I did them in the correct way. So I will have to consider the trajectory of this series, because I feel like with all the explanations I'm giving and maybe not trying to maximize my rating, I am going to hit a wall rating-wise. Not that I care that much, but it is more interesting if if my rating is going in a certain direction for you guys, the viewers. So let me know in the comments what you think I should do. Should I keep going with this series on chess.com? Should I maybe switch to a different site and try to solve tactics there? I know, for instance, on Chess Tempo, you don't get penalized for spending longer on problems. Let me know what you think. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Keep working on your tactics yourself. And the reason why I make these videos is because tactics are like one of the number one things. I don't want to say it's the number one thing, but it's one of the top things you can do just day to day with your chess that's always going to show benefits. Like staying sharp tactically is always going to give you the leg up in an actual game. And I assume most of you are training for competitive chess. So do your tactics, make sure you're getting those problems in. Solving tactics from books is also good, but there's just so many online trainers these days that are popular and quite helpful. So you can use those as well. And once again, thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. All right. Bye, guys.